We have to thank the Provost for her very generous words about the school and all that it has achieved. And of course, I mean, this is where we really do have to recognise the input of our alumni to those achievements, because, you know, what we do is we do research and we do teaching and learning. And without the students who come through those doors, it would be a very barren exercise for teaching, and not an awful lot of research would get done. So we also recognise the tremendous contribution that our students have made to the success of our school over those decades as well. So the next speaker is Professor Eric Finch. Now, he's no stranger to most of you. I think nearly everyone knows Eric. But I have to say that we owe Eric a tremendous debt of gratitude, amongst others in the school who have, you know, collected and written about the history of the school and the people who went before. And we drew on that resource for putting together our exhibition and for highlighting the achievements over the 3 centuries. So I'm really looking forward to this presentation. So no pressure, Eric, because we all want to know how you fish 3 centuries into 40 minutes. So I'm going to hand you over to.
Good, that's right. Oh gosh, wow, to see you all, Provost and ladies and gentlemen. Gosh, to see these faces, and what a time I've just had just now. Anyway, I must say straight away that I've almost in the last 10, 15 minutes learned quite well a great deal of history that I just simply didn't know about this building. So it was fascinating to hear it all. Now, I have to say that I'm really honoured to have been invited to give this talk. Really pleased indeed. Thank you very much indeed. The tercentenary of physics, that's a pretty good feat, really. I don't know whether it's the oldest chair in Ireland and Britain in physics, but it's pretty close to it. And there have been all sorts of Trinity physics professorships, especially recently. Looking at the title, I just sort of wonder, yes, perhaps that's not quite what it should be. It should be really that, the Erasmus Smith Professors of Natural and Experimental Philosophy, but if 1724, but if I had put that down, maybe you wouldn't have turned up in such a mouthful. Oh dear. Right. Now, the ultimate origins, if you've heard already, of the professorship actually go back to the mid-17th century and the foundation of an educational trust by Erasmus Smith and others, and others, and it was founded in 1669. Here's his portrait. The portrait is downstairs, in fact, and you can look at it. And his wife is there as well, but I'm not showing her. There's a 17th century gentleman. The trust. Oh yes. Many of the portraits I'll be showing you hang in this building already. So you can see them as you go down the stairs at your leisure. The trust founded several schools in Ireland, of which the high school in Rathgar still survives. And the trust also endowed several new positions in Trinity, as we've heard, including our own professorship. I can't remember the complete list of the other ones: oratory, Hebrew, I can't remember. Ours, as you've heard, professorship was actually considered to be a light duty add-on to the college fellowship that the professor had to hold as a prerequisite. And that prerequisite was true until, I suppose, the mid-20th century, something like that. However, election to the chair was based on the results of a public examination, and this examination established a high standard for the professorship. Now, of the however many there are, 22 holders to date of the professorship, at least a dozen of them can be considered as first-class academics. And what I want to do, well, wait, just a minute, you see. Now, judgmental call, isn't it, that I've got to make? Now, I'll certainly tell you about the ones who were first class and one or two who weren't first class. There. And don't worry, most of the time, for the last 100 years, they've been very good. So I think I'm safe. Now, but it's important to note that even before 1724, several Trinity College graduates had already done notable work in physics. And here are the pictures of three of them. William Molyneux, who wrote the first book in English in optics, textbook, and Narcissus Marsh, who is the same archbishop and also provost, actually, who founded Marsh's Library, and he did valuable work in acoustics. And there was George Berkeley, the philosopher, who did work on the theory of light and how you perceive vision. Now, our first Erasmus Smith professor, as you've heard from many people, was Richard Helsham. And he was appointed, as we've heard, on the 21st of April, 1724. In other words, the anniversary is this Sunday. Like many of the early fellows, Helsham was an able polymath. In other words, he could turn his hand to anything academic. He was he was very sociable. He was a friend of Jonathan Swift, and he was also his physician. So he was a medic as well. Back in 1711, Helsham was already teaching natural philosophy, that's physics, in an unpaid capacity here. And that year, he spoke at the opening of an anatomy house and e-laboratory, however you pronounce that word. You see it says e-laboratory on the word, on the right-hand side. Rather primitive building, which was thrown up, and I believe it was rather smelly with anatomy specimens being, no plumbing, no water, no sanitation or anything like that. But anyway, and it was right next to the library, the long library. Yes. Oh, yes. It was probably the first building in Ireland designed specifically for scientific purposes. So don't knock it, as it were. It did sterling work. His course of lectures, as you've heard, in physics was published after his death, and it continued in print, in fact, for many decades. And you must go and look at the first edition, which is on display in the Fitzgerald Library downstairs. That's the fourth edition. Dennis Weir, who we're very pleased to see you, Dennis, wherever you are, even founded, oh, hello, Dennis. He even found this Latin translation of Helsham's book that had been published in Vienna. That's where I learnt that at the bottom. Vindo Bona is the Latin for Vienna, apparently. Now, in these lectures, you've clearly heard, I think already, that Helsham believed in the scientific method and the new learning as opposed to the new medieval ideas of old. And the medieval ideas took a long time to die away, but there's also the lodestone you've heard about on that display downstairs, and Helsham used it for his experiments in magnetism. I like very well the last line of that. Trinity College near Dublin, and as many of you know, of course, that refers to the official name of the College of the Holy Trinity, etc., founded by Queen Elizabeth, near Dublin, because it's east of the old city walls, and it was out in the sticks, even in 1724. Where are we up to? Oh, yes, and Helsham used it in his experiments. Now, two Erasmus Smith's professors stand out from the latest 18th century. I'm skipping over a couple of the duds, by the way. The fourth professor was definitely not a dud, Hugh Hamilton, but he's no relation of William Rowan Hamilton. But the reason, he was rather mathematical. Things got a bit mathematical at the end of the 18th century. And his work on conic sections was particularly well received by the Swiss mathematician Leonhard Euler. You may have heard of Euler's well, never mind. I won't go there. Like nearly all the fellows until 1873, Hamilton was required to be in holy orders of the Church of Ireland. Later on, in fact, in Hamilton's case, he even became a bishop, so he couldn't have been too bad. His descendants, interestingly, include C.S. Lewis, the author of the Narnia stories, and the famous Synge family, S-Y-N-G-E, including the brothers Hutchie and that's a book that was edited by John Donegan, Dennis Weir, and the late and lamented Petros Florides, and that's his picture. And the mathematician John Lytton-Singh. Now, there is a picture of John Lytton-Singh, age 75, in there, with one or two people that you might recognize. Vincent, not quite as old, Vincent McBriety, Ian Macaulay, and yours truly, age 27 at the time. Yeah, yes. So quick, work out my age. Yeah, the sixth professor was the highly capable Matthew Young. Now, Matthew Young was no relation of Thomas Young of the Slits. I'm doing well on the no relation business, aren't I? But our own Young published on many topics in physics and maths, as well as on Irish literature, for which he actually learnt the Irish language. And that was quite a feat for a man like that back then. He was very popular with students and colleagues. I believe he crossed swords with the provost at the time, but I think he had a lot of support for that. Anyway, again, at the time. But I won't go there. Oh yeah, like Hamilton, he was very popular with students and colleagues. Like Hamilton, he became Bishop of Clonfert in East Galway, not far from the Shannon, even though neither physicist actively sought such a position. And that's saying something, because most people wanted to climb the clerical ladder. He didn't seek it, but he got it. But sadly, Young died in 1800, aged only 50, a serious loss to the church and to Irish scholarship. And I didn't check this, but I think I'm right in saying that this is hanging in the building in a rather obscure place. Yes, that's right, it's still there. And your challenge is, it's perfectly free to go and see it. But I wish I could offer a little prize to the first person to find it, but I can't think of a little prize to give you. But never mind. Now, where are we up to? Oh yeah, so 1800, for us here, the golden age of the 19th century began only in 1822, when the distinguished Bartholomew Lloyd became our 9th professor. He did no research, but he was hardworking. They weren't all hardworking, but most of them were. He wrote 2 mathematical textbooks and was a skillful teacher. Rowan Hamilton certainly was very grateful for all that he did when Rowan Hamilton, was a student. Lloyd became provost in 1831, and he then proposed as the 10th professor, a first-class college fellow and physicist who was entirely acceptable, except for one unfortunate feature. The candidate was his own son. Ooh, people were outraged, but Bartholomew Lloyd was a skillful diplomat, and he got his way. There was no one else, no other fellow who approached his son's talents. And of course, the son was Humphrey Lloyd. His research, as you've heard, include observing in 1833 the phenomenon of conical refraction in a biaxial crystal, in which the light spreads out along the surface of a cone and produces a ring of light on a screen. A remarkable demonstration. Now, you outside here, you will see the model describing the physics of conical refraction and the background, the Radiant Stranger sculpture. And it was just out there. It was launched in 2018 by Sir Michael Berry, FRS, came from Bristol, and there's who they are. Grace Weir was at the time the artist in residence in the School of Physics. Wow, the artist in residence, that was terrific. There's James, there's Iggy, Peter Gallagher, he's here, and Dave Grouse, who made it, and he made it in the workshop. Now, the next one, where are we? Oh yes, of course. There's also Lloyd's mirror experiment. This refers just very briefly to his work in 1834, the following year, on interference fringes, in which he correctly deduced that a phase shift of 180 degrees occurs for light waves reflected at grazing incidents on a glass surface. In other words, where he expected light fringes, he got dark ones, and vice versa. I certainly learned at Oxford when I was an undergraduate about Lloyd's mirror. I hadn't a clue that he came from Ireland. I was never told that. So yeah, I found out. Now, later that year, Lloyd began a magnetic crusade, in which observatories worldwide began simultaneous observations of the Earth's magnetic field. He and his father built a magnetical observatory, as they called it, in the Fellows' Garden, and it's pictured there. And it's near what is now the Long Room Hub in Fellows Square. It was built with as few magnetic impurities as possible, no ferrous fastenings for the doors or anything like that, no stone containing iron. And in 1972, as the college continued to expand, they needed the space. But it wasn't just smashed up and demolished. It was taken apart, dismantled, and it was re-erected in the Belfield's campus, UCD. It's a film institute, I believe. And that was the best I could do, taking a photograph of it 4 years ago. It was very difficult, 3 years ago. It was very difficult to get the leaves out of the way, but there it is. It's the same building. Humphrey Lloyd later became provost like his father, and thus he became the first provost since Narcissus Marsh, I told you, the chap who founded the Marsh's Library, to produce a significant amount of scholarship. Wow. You see what I mean? Now, Humphrey Lloyd's successor in 1843 as our 11th professor was the brilliant mathematical physicist James McCulloch. Now, his publications included a complete mathematical description of the propagation of reflection and refraction of light waves in crystalline materials. And it became the standard work for many years until the work of Clerk Maxwell and of Einstein. And those of you who remember your mathematical physics, McCulloch also devised the mathematical operation of taking what is now known as the curl of a vector, as opposed to div and all the rest of it. Outside physics, he purchased at his own expense, which was quite, well, he wasn't rich by any means, the Cross of Cong. The beautiful Cross of Cong, in fact, which he presented to the Royal Irish Academy, and it's now in the National Museum of Ireland. I believe he paid 100 guineas for it, and so you can use your internet inflation calculators to work out what the sum is now. It's not trivial out of your own pocket. However, the sad thing about James McCulloch, he overworked and he was depressed. He got a bout of depression. And sadly, in 1847, he committed suicide, I'm sorry to say, in his chambers in college. But now, the Irish famine of 1845 then followed, and that seriously affected the funds available from the Erasmus Smith Trust for its professorships. And it was several years, in fact, before the trust recovered. From 1854, our 13th professor was this guy, Joseph Allen Galbraith, who worked his way up, I think, from fairly humble beginnings, so just reading between the lines, worked really hard, got his fellowship first attempt. I was delighted to see that. He was a nationalist. Wow, a nationalist in 19th century Trinity? Well, he sort of started off, as far as I could work out, by going and hearing and enjoying Daniel O'Connell's speeches against the 1800 Act of Union. And after he became a fellow in 1870, it was actually proposed that in order to work against the union between England and Ireland, a Home Government Association should be founded. Galbraith thought that this was a too cumbersome phrase, so instead he coined the name Home Rule. It caught on, and you know the rest of the story, of course. It is amazing to think that home rule as an expression started with an Erasmus Smith's professor, one of ours. Cool. His increasingly radical statements might well have contributed to his early departure from the Erasmus Smith's chair. And not surprisingly, Trinity never commissioned a portrait of him. You might well ask, well, what about physics? Yes, he did do a bit of physics, actually. He built a Foucault pendulum, not in the museum building, because you need a high building. That hadn't been built yet. He built it in the engine shed of the railway just behind us here, the railway line to Bray, which was nice and high to disperse the smoke. How did he manage that? How did he... I was going to say, how did he swing that? I don't think I really meant that. Well, the chief engineer, apparently, of the line was a man called Wilfred Horton, and the collaborator with which he was working on building this was the fellow in Trinity, Samuel Horton, and the two were cousins of each other. There you are, family links. Now, in contrast to the lack of portraits of Galbraith, portraits abound of the 15th professor from 1881, the highly talented and charismatic George Francis Fitzgerald. That picture is downstairs in the Fitzgerald Library. And perhaps most famous, as you doubtless know, for his 1889 Fitzgerald-Lorentz effect, when he anticipated Einstein's theory of relativity by proposing that an object appears to contract when it moves along its length. A very clever piece of deduction. 4 years later, Heinrich Hertz in Germany verified this prediction experimentally. Now, I often think that if Fitzgerald had demonstrated it himself, then maybe we would now refer to our mains electricity frequency as being not 50 hertz, but 50 Fitzgeralds. Oh gosh, that was not sure. His mind teemed with brilliant suggestions. Not that one, but they did. But remarkably, he was only too happy for others to verify his ideas. Remarkable, if you think about it, compared with today's attitude. Fitzgerald wanted physics to be available for anyone, even women, instead, yes, girls, instead of being just the private pursuit of gentlemen of means. Yeah, he was an ardent supporter of DUISA, the University Experimental Science Association for Students. A century later, our student Fysock was an offspring of it. In case you don't recognize Fysock, the older ones of you, that's the shortening for the DU, Physical Society. There you are. And when Fitzgerald married, you've heard it all, his former students clubbed together to present to him the magnificent Fitzgerald clock downstairs, and there's the plaque. And you've heard already that Dennis Weir obtained it for us through our voluntary contributions out of our own wallets, and thus it came back to Ireland and back to Trinity. Now, I want to play for you what you call an MP3 of later Erasmus Smith professor E.T.S. Walton, there he is, telling us a bit more about Fitzgerald. And some of you will have heard this before, but never mind.
Everybody knows that Fitzgerald was famous for the Fitzgerald-Lorentz contraction. Another thing that he was famous for was his attempts to fly. And for some years in the 1890s, he used to try to fly in College Park. And there's some interesting photographs, and one of them shows Fitzgerald with his arms out like this and wings attached to his arms and running down a ramp that was erected over the pavilion steps. It was also get some students to tow him. They had a long rope attached to this, and they ran for all their worth. And I think they were not particularly careful about Fitzgerald.
There you are. It's wonderful to hear his voice. I think I heard him say, giving that lecture actually in this theatre. Someone can correct me afterwards if I'm wrong. His glider was displayed.
Everybody knows.
Now, how do I get out of this? Ah, here we are. Here it was displayed in 1898, hanging in the museum building, and it hung there for 40 years until a student thoughtlessly saw a string hanging from it. He thought, oh, let's apply a match to it. And of course, the whole lot went up in flames. It's not recorded who he was. It found to be he. Sorry? Oh, yes. Thank you. I did know that. I'd forgotten. Not a physicist. To everyone's great dismay, Fitzgerald died in 1901, aged only 49. He had many highly talented assistants. Some were already even FRSs, fellows of the Royal Society, like Joly and Troughton. There is Joly and Troughton together with Fitzgerald in 1897. But there was little chance of Joly and Troughton being elected to one of the limited number of college fellowships, then that was still a prerequisite for the Erasmus Smith's professorship. Nearly all the assistants, therefore, decided to go to other universities. The brilliant John Joly, and my gosh, he was a great chap, but he stayed, and he ought to have succeeded to Fitzgerald, but he still wasn't a Trinity Fellow. So the one remaining Trinity Fellow in physics, Willie Thrift, became the 16th professor until 1929. That was the longest professorship of the Erasmus Smith professors, 20 to whatever years it is. Later, he became provost, and here is his portrait. And yeah, it's not very flattering, really. Thrift was known for his administrative abilities, but he lacked charisma, to put it mildly by the sounds of it, and he had little taste or time for research. Shortly after his election to the professorship, this building of ours was erected and constructed. I think that picture was taken by a party of dignitaries from what became the Rice University in the States, to see the best constructed university buildings in the world, so they could construct an even better physics department. But from the set of pictures on the internet, it looked as if they saw a lot of other sites, just nice, typical tourist sites, and there are not too many photographs of laboratories. But anyway, they had a great time, and that's the photograph. Where are we? Oh, yes, this building was built in 1905, that sort of era. But this was thanks to the efforts of not Thrift, but the professor of geology, none other than John Joly. In 1922, Thrift was elected to represent Trinity in Dáil Éireann, not Seanad Éireann, of course, because that only started up in 1937 when there was the new constitution. In the same year, 1922, E.T.S. Walton entered Trinity as an undergraduate, where, in his words, he found his physics course, quote, an up-to-date one for about the year 1910. This was a severe criticism from the mild-mannered Walton, especially as it referred to a period when physics was rapidly developing. Even the discovery of, for example, the atomic nucleus wasn't taught, as far as I can see. That was 1911. In 1929, Robert Ditchburn became our 17th professor and the first who was not a Trinity graduate. He had been elected to the previous year to a fellowship in experimental physics here, to his and everybody else's great surprise. And that was on the Trinity Monday when everyone was expecting someone else. And this man cropped up when the provost announced. He was just 25, and he came straight from a Cambridge PhD, supervised in the Cavendish laboratory by J.J. Thomson, who discovered the electron, and J.J. Thomson and others supported him with glowing references, apparently. Ditchburn was like a whirlwind. Within a year of his arrival in Trinity, the College Board agreed to his proposed major and seriously overdue revisions of the physics undergraduate course. As one of his students, a woman, Joyce Power Steele, neatly put it, from Newton to Einstein. It was all quite an achievement for someone so young. In his 18 years at Trinity, he managed to publish some 35 papers on optics and other topics. The supports that you got from college was, there was no money at all. He had a secretary, she was unpaid, the secretary was his wife. So, oh well, he made do, and he managed, yeah, he spoke trenchantly about Ireland and its general stagnation. Read my book and golly, there's a good story there. Oh, by the way, yes, you heard. I don't need to plug my book, do I? He had a strong social conscience, and he personally helped some refugees, physicists from Nazi Germany and Austria. In my opinion, Ditchburn deserves to be remembered in Trinity far better than he is. Now, the 19th professor was, I'm losing track. Where are we? The 18th professor was the Nobel laureate, E.T.S. Walton. And there's a stamp which was issued to commemorate the centenary of his birth. And that was in 2003. His election, Walton's election to the professorship, and Ditchburn's resignation were announced in 1946 on the same day, almost in the successive minutes of the board, not quite the same minute. Back in 1932, Walton and Cockcroft, of course, had rocketed to worldwide fame for splitting the atomic nucleus in Trinity. There's his accelerator with the discharge spheres on the left, and there he is on the right, grinning as ever so pleased with what he's just done. Walton with but Rutherford with a Homburg hat, and Cockcroft looking as if he's had so many late nights trying to do work. But Walton, as they say, notice his pockets absolutely jammed full of all sorts of things. No doubt little screwdrivers and gadgets and things that he was tremendously good with his hands. He really was. Walton would have been the only appointable fellow anyway. Trinity and its scientific research had sunk to a very low point in Ireland's poverty-stricken 1940s and 1950s. His Van de Graaff accelerator, high voltage accelerator, he built it here just behind you, but it achieved only very limited success. Do go and look at his accelerator tube. When I saw it 1 hour ago, it was in the marquee outside, beautifully lit up. This is the end bit sticking on the right, but I believe it's going to be moved back into the Fitzgerald Library sometime later this afternoon. So, but you'll be able to see it. Beautifully constructed. Even in the 1960s, new physics staff came, but all too often soon went, especially when the government tried in 1967 to merge Trinity with UCD. Despite all, Walton maintained his meticulous care of the department until he retired in 1974. And this is Vincent McBriarty's biography of Walton. And here's our sculpture outside in his memory by Eilish O'Connell, Apples and Atoms, unveiled in 2013. There she is, picked out. His sons and daughters are on the left, and we're very pleased to see Marion wherever you are. There you are, and there she is with her brothers and sisters, and we remember the occasion well. And notice that there's a newly planted apple tree behind, planted there to be reflected in the surfaces of the spheres, which would reflect the discharge tubes, discharge spheres he used for getting rid of any high voltage produced. And there's another apple tree on the other side. And I noticed just now that those apple trees are not only just bigger now, but flowering beautifully with blossom. So do go and have a look and take a photograph. The point about that link is, of course, that Walton loved growing fruit and vegetables. I know because Jean and I once went to eat in his house, and gosh, there was lovely homemade food and homegrown food. The 19th professor from 1974 was Brian Henderson. Now, by then, the Erasmus Smith Trust was not involved in the election process, and a college fellowship was no longer a prerequisite. Like Ditchburn, in fact, Henderson was an English whirlwind. He came from Yorkshire. Ditchburn came from Lancashire. Lovely. No war of the Roses. He used a large grant from college to supplement the research equipment he'd brought over from Keele University for his highly productive solid-state spectroscopic research. You've heard already that he extended the space for physics into what became the adjoining Dixon Laboratory. He strongly supported the founding of the Dublin University Physical Society, the present-day FISOC, and I have here the attendance register for its very first lecture, delivered not by an FRS or a fellow of the college or anything like that, one of our undergraduates. And you can see who chaired it because I sprawled my spaghetti on the right-hand side. And among the people there, there's Hendo, Brian Henderson. He attended as well. ETS, Walton sometimes attended, but he didn't attend the first one. He also, Henderson, recruited the future Erasmus Smith's professor, Mike Coey, as well as several other highly talented physicists for the teaching staff, including the world-famous femtosecond pulse laser physicist, Dan Bradley. Tragically, only 3 years after arriving, Bradley suffered a devastating stroke that forced him to retire early. And if I just add a personal note, that stroke was vastly worse than my own stroke that I had two years ago. Poor Dan Bradley was reduced to uttering only 4 words. It was terrible. Henderson created a flourishing physics department and a lasting collegiality and esprit de corps, how about that, among its whole staff. And that was a legacy that I know that his successors highly appreciated. He resigned in 1984, but he retained a lifelong affection for Trinity. He was eventually elected to an honorary fellowship, and that distinction was denied to Ditchburn. You can hear more about Henderson and Bradley from Werner Blau at next Monday's, Trinity Monday's Memorial Discourse. It's next week, so the three days' time, you can hear more about them. The 20th professor is here, and that was Dennis Weir. The department continued to flourish under first his own headship, and later under succeeding heads appointed under the rotating system that he established in 1989. And I love this picture, which was the handover ceremony when Dennis handed over the headship, not the chairer, because that was later, the headship to Mike Coey. I'll mention the mural behind them in a moment. Among the many computational physics interests of Dennis was his discovery of the Weir-Phelan foam structure. And a model of this hangs on the wall at the top of the SNIAM building. There's Dennis and Grace Weir again. Now, this foam structure is, and I take a deep breath, 0.3% more economical in foam's area for equal-sized bubbles compared with Kelvin's own conjecture in 1887. And I hope I've got that roughly right, Dennis, because I'll never forget Dennis saying to me, Eric, you may think that 0.3% is very small, but in foam physics, it's everything. Yes, indeed. In due course, he was elected to FRS, so he proved it right. Now, this is my wife's, Jean's, Weir-Phelan necklace pendant, and she's wearing it this afternoon, especially for us. And these are two of the books that Dennis wrote. One of them was Stefan Hutzler, who's also here with us today. In 2000, where are we up to? We always enjoyed Dennis's characterization of Fitzgerald. Oh, his famous predecessor. They were wonderful when he came in dressed like Fitzgerald. Dennis, complete with instant beard, lovely. Dennis encouraged support for our historical heritage of equipment, and he also secured nearly all the portraits now hanging here in the School of Physics. He commissioned the mural that I mentioned a moment ago in the old JFB lab that you saw in the picture behind him and Mike Coey. And it's got quotations, or it had quotations, about several Erasmus Smith professors and other physicists of ours. It was lovely. But alas, inevitably, 10 years ago, what happened to it? It had to be sacrificed. And the reason it had to be sacrificed was to make way for the building of SNIAM. It was in the way. But we enjoyed the mural for 10 years. It was lovely. Dennis had a great retirement party. Never forget it. The guests included Iggy McGovern on the left, Seamus Heaney, the poet, and they're all poets, and Brendan Kennelly. I have to say that I thought that Seamus Heaney gave a superb speech from here at the end of the whatever it was we were having. But Brendan, the evening, but Brendan Kennelly's speech was even better. Oh, it was marvelous. In 2007, the 21st professor, getting close to the present time, Mike Coey, FRS, was elected through the process of translation, or moving sideways from his previous professorship in the department. Bishops used to be moved from diocese to diocese by translation, and it's the same idea. His extensive writings are based on his work in magnetism and magnetic materials have won him, as I'm sure you realize, widespread international acclaim. Now, just listen to this one carefully. He ranks, I hope I got this right, with the best 0.01% of all scientists in the world, all of them, for his impact and for his citations. That is some achievement. He has received many national and international honours, not just merely the Royal Irish Academy gold medal that he got from Mary McAleese, but he was elected as a foreign associate of the USA National Academy of Sciences, the first from Ireland, apart from William Rowan Hamilton, well over a century earlier. Now, Mike officially retired in 2012, and an extended vacancy followed in the Erasmus Smith chair. Eventually, after 10 years, 2022, the 22nd and present professor, Jonathan Coleman, was elected, like Mike, by translation from a former professorship of his. One of Johnny's latest honours for his highly cited work in nanomaterials is his own gold medal in the sciences from the Royal Irish Academy. And here he is, just after receiving it, with Jane Ohlmeyer, who had also just received her Academy Gold Medal, in her case, in the humanities. And they and our provost, who is here with us, Linda Doyle, on the right-hand side, are here talking with the Academy's then president. Now, remarkably, both medalists are from Trinity, and both hold Erasmus Smith professorships. So there you are. Jane's is in modern history. Now, Johnny is giving his inaugural lecture here, he assures me, on Wednesday next week. So that's another thing for your diary. Gosh, it's all happening, isn't it? What with Trinity Monday and now Johnny's inaugural. He is our only, and I hope I've got this right, Johnny, wherever you are. Yeah. Oh, you're there. He is our only Erasmus Smith professor, I think, so far, who has been conferred with a PhD by Trinity. Without our department's extraordinary transformation from the 1970s on, I guess that he might well have looked for a PhD elsewhere, just as Walton did. I'm speculating, I haven't asked you, John. It's 52 years since I accepted the offer of appointment to a position here in Trinity Physics, and so I've witnessed myself most of this amazing transformation. I've seen the number of full professors in the department, which is now a full school, grow to 5. 4 of these chairs, 4 of these professorships are personal to the holder. Only the Erasmus Smith professorship is an established chair. In other words, the established chairs just can continue and you get new appointments, and personal chairs, when you resign or retire from it, that's the end of it. I'm very pleased to get that this professorship, this position, has been filled again after the 10-year vacancy. Now, here are the names of all the 22 professors. And the first thing I notice is still no women, though, so try your best, please. When the time comes in the future, probably when I'll be pushing up the daisies, it will be great if a 23rd Erasmus Smith professor can be elected so as to maintain our fine tradition of the 3 centuries of the professorship. Thank you very much for listening.